Well, good morning everybody. I'm finally back. I'm in my pajamas and I'm here with my son, Hugo. And we're going to do a tour because it's been way too long and I just never get time to do it. So we're just going to do it now. Sorry, it's a bit windy. I hope you can still hear me all right. We'll see how we go. So the garden is very full at the moment, which is wonderful. I just don't have as much time, obviously, now that I have a 7-month-old, to get out here and tend it as much as I would have previously, but I intended to have it fairly low maintenance-ish because I knew that I was going to have my beautiful little boy with me this season, and so I tried to think of that. I've had a lot of issues with keeping seedlings alive this time because we've had a lot of rain, and so we have a lot more snails and slugs in the garden, which I have not really had before. So I haven't really been able to come out and cover them as much as what I would have done, because I don't like covering them during the day, because if you cover them during the day, the sun can kill them off if you have like a cover of this over them. It's better if you do that like over the night and then take it off in the morning. But these are some zinnias here. I can't remember which variety because I sowed one variety but then they didn't come up, so I think I might have just chucked in a bunch of mixed ones there. But over here in the middle, I gave up because this space has been pretty bare, apart from a couple of things like that. Some dill over here, and there's some mammoth sunflowers, which I purposely let 2 go because I don't want them to get as big as what they usually do. But I decided to just plant some small bush cucumbers in the middle to see if we could get a bit more use out of this space. So that variety is called Space Master, so it's supposed to be a little bit smaller and a bit more of a bushy type and not like sort of sprawl all over the place. So we'll see how we go with that. This here is some chamomile. I ended up having to get just a start from Bunnings because I had heaps of seedlings come up, but then the next day they were all eaten up. So I decided to try and beat the slugs and just plant a start this time. I used up all of my chamomile seeds, and you get like 1,000 in a packet, but I'm gonna give them this one, and this is just the easiest way to actually get some chamomile this season. Over in that little spot there is some basil, and I've had a really big difficulties getting basil seedlings to come up. I don't know if it's just because I haven't been on top of watering and keeping the spaces wet. We've had a lot of rain, so it's been a little bit on and off, but we haven't had much recently, so we'll just see how we go. And that there, like I said, is some dill. It just smells amazing. And then I've got some beans over here. This variety here is this is a bush bean, but you can see it is kind of crawling a little bit, so I just put in some little teepees to get a bit more support, because it was crawling over into this other variety of bush beans and kind of taking that over, so I sort of wanted to give it a bit of support so it could climb here. And so I just checked the tag, and this variety, these 2 rows, are speckled cranberry, and I usually just grow beans for fresh eating. I haven't really grown them yet to harvest them as dry beans for cooking in soups and things like that so far. I just like using them fresh and like using them for like dips like hummus and stuff like that. And these ones here are my favorite. These are the dragon's tongue bush beans. There's lots of flowers, and there might be some little beans in there somewhere, but haven't seen anything that are not nearly big enough to harvest yet. And over here, this big mass here are my potatoes that I'm growing this year. You see I've put some stakes here because they were just falling over the bush beans here, and so they weren't actually growing very well because they were getting super shaded out. So, excuse you, little man. And so I just wanted to keep the potatoes sort of in this pack. And we had a few storms and it was quite windy, and so that's I think why these potatoes are down here. They're sort of fallen over, and I didn't want to risk breaking the stems by trying to pick them up again, so I sort of just let them hang over, and hopefully there's enough sugarcane mulch in there that the ones that have sort of got a bit more sun on them will still be all right when we go to harvest them. And then over in this big long bed here, these are just some dwarf sunflowers from some seeds I saved from one of the previous seasons. I think there's actually only like 2 or 3 plants here, but it's pretty neat because they have like multiple heads on the same plant, like a big one at the top and then like little ones down here. And then there's a nasturtium there that reseeded, which was amazing because we put like a layer of new compost on these beds, get them ready for this season, which was like at least 10 or 15 centimeters, maybe even 20 centimeters deep, and they still reseeded from seeds from the previous season. So I thought that was pretty cool. I can't remember what variety. It might be Alaskan Scarlet or something similar. No, I think it's Orchid Cream. I think it's Orchid Cream, but they're really pretty. I do like these flowers. They're sort of creamy with like this splash of red in the middle. And then there is a bit of a bare patch in there. I had a bunch of radishes here, which I've already harvested a while ago, and they were excellent, but there are actually some little basil seedlings in there finally, so I'm hoping they grow well. And then this here, I planted 2 seeds, so there's 2 plants here, and they are the yellow crookneck squash, and I've really liked them. This is the first time I've grown them, first time I've eaten them. So you can see that one back there I need to harvest. And what I usually do, and I found another recipe actually, is I slice them up, and this time they're a little bit bigger, so I kind of quartered them, and I just like saute them. Yeah, I saute them in just a bit of olive oil, and then I put like a herb oil with a bit of lemon over them this time. Like once they were sauteed, I flipped them in some herb oil and then covered them with like panko crumbs and parmesan and salt and pepper and parsley, and they were delicious. They were really, really good. So I think I'm going to keep doing that. And then these ones, I'm growing a lot of beans because they're really easy to grow and really easy to harvest. So with little man, I thought that was probably the way to go. And so we've got some little beans in here starting to grow. And these ones, I think, are purple prince. They're a purple variety, and so that's why they look darker. Their leaves are darker and purplish. They're either purple prince or royal burgundy, something like that, but they're a bush variety. I think this is from my basil. Yeah, I did try to have some basil grow along here, but a cat got into my bed and yeah, it messed up all the it just like scratched everything around, so I got no seedlings there, but I think it's all right because then now the beans are kind of sprawling over here anyway. There's a bit of a space here that you can see, but I did have a bunch of lettuce there and we were eating from that, but then we had a really hot day and it all went to seed, so I finally took that out just to give a bit more space to the rest of the garden. And here I've had a lot of issues with seedlings growing from seed this time, as I mentioned, and zinnias were one of the ones that took a while to germinate and grow up. I think it also could have been because the perpetual spinach there shaded it out. You can see how beautiful and luscious and big it is. But this zinnia here, I believe, is the Clean Lime zinnia, which is one of my favorite ones, and it's starting to bud here, and it's got a few other ones down there. Right next to it is another basil, but this is lettuce leaf basil, which I've never grown before, and it's taken a while to start, but it smells delicious and it's going okay now. I just want to get it a bit more established before we start eating off it. And down here's another zinnia. You see it's kind of like, it's not as strong as the others. It's also been quite shaded by the spinach. I have been thinking of just like cutting this like right back because it grows really well, so then we'll get a bit more sun on the zinnias and the basil to help them get established. Once again, just need a bit of time to actually just do that. But yeah, so this one is Rosy Lavender zinnia, so I'm pretty keen to see that one because I haven't grown that one before. Behind me we've got like a lot of potted plants. So this is what I did when I was pregnant. I just had a bunch of things in pots because it was a bit easier to manage and it wasn't a whole garden. So we had radishes, so we ate a bunch of those, and then I let them go to seed because the bees love them. And we've been actually eating the pods here because you can eat radish pods and they are just like a mild radish. So they're quite nice to snack on. They're like nice and crispy. You can save them for seed, but I've sort of been leaving them for the bees, but also to just snack on in the garden. They're getting a bit more firm now, so they're not as nice and crisp and fresh as they were when they first set the little pods, but they're still alright. I just need to pull them out probably soon. I want to amend and rip out and amend some of these pots so I can plant something else in them. So this is like a blue Scotch curly kale, or something very similar to that. I can't remember the exact wording. And I also had like a scarlet kale, I think. And so they did alright, but they were pretty slow growing. I've had better success with kale in the beds, and I probably didn't fertilize these plants in pots as much as they needed. But then they looked like they were starting to go to seed, so I've cut them back. But you can see that some of them are starting to grow back. And we'll just see how the weather goes. It has been pretty cool here now in November, which we don't usually have. So I might be able to actually harvest some more of that while it's still cool. We'll just see. Otherwise, I'll amend that and plant something different. Then we've still got some pansies. This was just a mix that I got from Bunnings. It was like a strawberry mix or something like that. So I don't know the actual varieties of those, but it's just been nice to add a bit of colour. I think maybe a cat's sat in it because it's had this weird dent in it for nearly the whole time. And then I've got some red shallots here. Again, I don't think I fertilised it maybe as much as it needed because the greens look very good, but they haven't really got much of a bulb. They're not supposed to have very much of a bulb, but they still look kind of small. But yeah, anyway, I need to start using those. And then I've got 3 tomatoes, which are all the same variety. They are, I'll have to check. I don't think it's Mortgage Lifter. They have actually, so I actually put, so these ones are Tommy Toe, these two, and the other one I think is actually a different variety. But I did have some other tomatoes called Mortgage Lifter in these, which I got from a shop as a start, and they ended up getting leaf spot really bad as seedlings, which is not super great. And I knew this would probably or could possibly happen because I think some diseases for tomatoes or other plants can live in the soil, but I put some more tomatoes in it anyway, and now it's getting leaf spot. So it was probably not the smartest thing to do, but I'm glad that at least I have them in the pots and not in the bed with the rest of my tomatoes. So we will see how we go with that. I may rip them out or I might just see how they go. Yeah, undecided yet. And this is a poppy. I think it's frilled California rose, but it's been beautiful. It closes up at nighttime and then it flowers during the day. And all of these are actually poppies that have already flowered, and they're the seed pods. And so I'm thinking I'm going to leave it and let all the pods dry out so that I can collect the seeds. So like that's a seed pod that's starting to dry out in there. So I thought that'd be pretty cool. And so the leaves are really frilly as well, a bit more frillier than some of your standard poppies. This is one of my other tomatoes. This one was just called beefsteak. So I don't really know what it is, but it also looks a little bit sick. So I don't know how that will go. And this is just some radishes. I don't know what happened with this potting mix because I amended it and then planted radishes, and it's just done completely terrible. So I don't know what happened there. So I'll need to sort of cut them out and amend it and plant something different. Over in the long beds though, this is my row of indeterminate tomatoes, so tomatoes that will keep growing up and up and up and up. I try and keep them pruned to one main stem so they can put a bit more energy into the fruit, and then it also gives them a lot of airflow so that they don't get as sick when it's wet. There's lots of flowers and we're starting to get fruit set now, which is really awesome. So there's a few down here. I have had problems previously with fruit fly and caterpillars, and usually I will cover them up with like a mesh baggie, which I have not done yet, and I only just remembered this morning that that was something I usually get onto when the fruit has set. But for most of the varieties I'm growing are like bigger varieties, and so you need to have a bag that will allow it to grow. So you can't use like a small baggie, it needs to be bigger. So I need to get onto that. I'm pretty sure I still have some in my boxes of gardening supplies, so I just need to get out here and do it. So the varieties that I'm growing this year, these two plants are pink Berkeley tie-dye, which I've never grown before. So most of these I just bought from a gardening supply shop, and there's only two that I started from seed. So the first two here, pink Berkeley tie-dye. The next two are Aunt Ruby's German green. I've never grown a green tomato before, so I really wanted to try that. And then the next one here, and the one that's got that fruit there, this is a yellow tomato and it's called Big Barrel. So I'm pretty keen about that because generally your yellow tomatoes are sweeter than like your black or blue tomatoes. They say that sometimes they have a bit more smoky sort of taste. And then these two are, I think they're a bit more of a cherry. They are tomato pink bumblebee, so I'm pretty excited about that one, and they've got some little fruit starting to set. And then these two down the end here, I'm super excited about. These are the only two that I started from seed in the garden this year, and they are from seed that I saved last year from one of my favorite tomatoes that I bought from America. And at the moment, well, last time I checked, we can't buy tomato seeds from America anymore. It won't come through customs because there's a tomato virus called tomato mosaic virus, and so just because of the risk of contamination, they won't allow tomato seeds through customs at the moment over here. So I am glad that I have those seeds so that I can still grow them here, because I loved that tomato. It's one of my favorite ones. So they are very, very special ones, and so I'm pampering them the same as the rest of them down there because I love growing tomatoes, especially the big ones. So that's why they are a lot smaller than those ones, because the big ones all came as seedlings that were probably about at least 15 to 20 centimeters high when I planted them in the ground, whereas these ones, which are called Dr. Witch's Yellow, I planted just as seeds, and so that's why they are so much behind. But that's all right, because I've kind of just staggered my planting, so when these ones might be petering out, these ones should be in their prime, hopefully. And then in this second long bed here, you can see there's a lot of grass. It grows up through the bottom of the beds. We tried to put weed mat around the edges of the beds, I think, when we put them in, but the grass here is pretty persistent, so generally I just try and come through and just weed that out. I kind of find it pretty therapeutic. Then this melon here has been very slow growing, but I think I planted it when it was still fairly cold. We've had a pretty cool spring this year where we are in southeast Queensland, and it's usually not still this cold. But that melon there is a Kajari melon. I didn't have much luck the last time I grew it. It's very susceptible to fruit fly, but I really want to try it again to see how I go. Then next to it is asparagus pea, which I've also never grown before, and I thought it said it needed trellising, but it's just sort of growing out, so I'm not sure yet. We'll just have to see how it goes. As kind of like a backup to this one next to it, I've also planted another cucumber that vines, so I'm going to trellis it up. But I also do actually have, that was before this cucumber here and next to it had started to perk up. So this is an Armenian cucumber, which is technically a melon, but you can grow it and eat it just like you would a cucumber. So that one's trellising up, so it's actually looking a lot better now. And then these beans here next to me, they have pretty little orangey salmon flowers there. This one is, completely forgotten the name. This is the painted lady bean, and it is obviously one that goes up nice and tall, so it really needed trellising. I think I've seen some beans start to form, but yeah, still waiting to get any harvest off of that yet. But I hadn't grown that one before. And wanted to give it a go, and I just love having like these green walls on the trellises. I think it's pretty. So that's what I've got growing in the garden now on the 7th of November. I do have still a bit of a herb garden out the front, which I quite like because it's really neat to go out and grab from that. So I'll probably give an update on that in the next one. But I hope you enjoyed seeing what's in the garden today, and I'll put up another update soon.